What I want to do today is start a series on what I call clutter saws. And this is a concept that Bob and I have kicked around a little bit. And the idea is taking stuff that's been sort of kicked to the side in the shop that's functional, possibly, but not something you'd want to put in the better of your own saws and certainly not somebody else's. But they're too good to really throw away. And the examples of clutter on this table are many. That piston was out of one of my early research saws, and that top wasn't quite square, so I had to trim that up to make it nice and symmetric. Another project saw, I had cut this base a little bit too far, so I wasn't going to use that one. Yeah, and this piston's got some, you know, score marks and stuff like that. But they were, you know, one of those things where I couldn't quite just pull the plug and put them in the trash. That's the raw material for a clutter saw. The second concept is the ultimate old man saw. I have to confess, as I'm getting older, the vibration and weight mean more and more. I'm not as interested in holding on to a steel MS660 as I am something with a nice, smooth anti-vibe system. And the 372s were smooth enough and light enough for the longest period of time, and I eventually replaced those with this saw here, which was a 562 that's been modified. Now the modifications on that saw were designed to take care of some heat issues and some starting issues, and comprised of increasing the compression and making some modifications to get heat out of the saw. And I did that on video, explain what they were about. For example, the muffler mod, cut covers, pop-up piston, deck cylinder. And while there may be more power in that configuration, the genesis of the design was other things. And I'm not going to go into the details. But anyway, what I wanted to do was to get that kind of power characteristics that I got out of that 562 modified and put them in a saw of that size and weight, the Husqvarna 555. The differences between the 555 and the 562 are more involved than you might think. Well, I blew it so bad on the camera angles before. I'm going to try the other side again, and I'm going to continue on my quest to get the ultimate old man saw up and running today. I've just had one thing after another keep me from being able to make that a success. Well, I gave up. Bought a crank. That's part number 5755452-13. And I've already installed it. There's no sense in me putting that on video. I've done it a gazillion times. But I find it interesting that the kit comes with the radial seal for this is the flywheel side, and of course the two bearings, one of which has an integral seal that's on the PTO side. But it also comes with a wrist pin bearing. And I'm going to keep these. I've got some parts I'm going to throw into the saw that are used and probably abused. This is what came out. I actually had put that thing together. I think I had said it in the video. I actually had put that case together with the bad crank here. I want you to look at something. If you look really carefully, let me see if I bring the light over, it'll help. If you look really carefully, you'll see that gray. I'd put 1184 in there, and the thickness of that gray right there, assuming that's been wiped out, is roughly how much of that crank has been wiped off from its abuse, or pounded from its abuse. So this crank really is no good. I wasted $150 on a set of cases and this crank hoping I could put this thing together. It's funny because when I first looked at that set of cases with the crank, I almost thought about putting it together as it was because it turned smooth. My experience has told me that means nothing. Unfortunately, when I took things apart, I realized the whole bottom end is a waste. Now, the one good piece of news about this is I might be able to salvage these cases, because those bearings are still interference fit. There's a chance that I can actually salvage those set of cases. And, you know, still a waste of money, but at least it'll be a little less painful in being able to salvage something out of this deal. I have already put on the ignition system. I've already set it. I have to add this washer. I forgot to put that on, so I have to pull the nut off and put the washer on there. And the reason why you have to put the ignition on first before the flywheel is because the wires to the Autotune module and the kill switch go underneath the flywheel. Now the spec on these nuts is somewhere around 26 foot-pounds, and I've learned that the spec on the steels, the big MS 660s, is like 33. They're a little bit larger. And there's people who really pay attention to that. I probably should more than I do. One of the things I got to point out is when I put on this tray here, it goes underneath the carburetor. You see how the ground wire goes to that screw? Get that on there. And also, this strap gets trapped by the tray against the cases. And you forget that once. It's a real pain in the neck to get that in there. Put the oil pump on. It has to have the right piece here. This is unique to the small case versions of this saw. By the way, I was wrong. There's not 5 of these things. There's 6. I articulated last video that there was 5 of these things. And the fact is there's 4 of the small mounts and then 2 of the large mounts. And the 4 small mounts are 555, 560, which is effectively the same as a Jonsered 2260, and the 555 Husqvarna is the same as the Jonsered 2258. So you have the Husky 555 with no stuffers and the Jonsered 2258 with no stuffers, all small mount. Then the Husqvarna 560 small mount with a stuffer crank, and the Jonsered 2260 with a stuffer crank, and of course that goes along with a different ignition module, carburetor, the whole setup. And then the 2 large mount offerings are the 562 with a stuffer, and I guess in Australia they offer a non-stuffer version of the 562. They call it the 556, I guess. So you have the 562 with stuffers and the 556 with no stuffers on the large mount cases. And it's funny, my brother just bought one of those 2260s from Bob. I'm going to tell you right now, he spent less money on that new 2260 than I'm spending on this project right here. That's an embarrassment, but it's true. Because I tried to eBay parts, you know, and it's the same old thing. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. This is a project where it did not work because all the bottom end parts I had gotten that were Jonsered 2260, they were just trashed. I got 2 cranks that were trashed, and I got the cases with a crank that was trashed. And then one of the guys swore up and down, so a guy sells used parts up in Maine, that he was giving me a 2260 crank because he was parting one out. What he gave me, in fact, was a 562 crank, and I couldn't use it. And I actually stuck it in the cases to add insult to injury. Had to pull that apart. So these cases have been apart twice. First with a crank that was for a 562, and I thought it was a 2260 because that's what I purchased. And then as soon as I started looking at how this lined up here, I realized that that wasn't going to work. And then the second one was the one that came out of these cases here. You know, I put that crank in here, and that was, yeah. So I just gave up. Spent my money. But the whole concept of a junk pile saw really kind of goes out the window because pretty much everything on this bottom end, from the oil pump cases and crank and bearings, all that stuff is brand new. About the only thing that's junk pile on this saw is going to be all the stuff above, You know, piston, cylinder will be junk pile, muffler will be junk pile. And I actually bought a pull start, and I actually bought a side cover. So this is building a saw in pieces. I think there was a Johnny Cash song once about building a Cadillac out of pieces. I think that's more along the lines of this saw. And so while I wanted this to be the junk pile saw, it's not going to be a junk pile saw. There's too many new parts. So it's just going to be the ultimate old man saw. Now that's not to say that the junk pile concept has failed on this class of saws. It's just it failed in this case because I was really specific on what I wanted. You know, had I gotten a wrecked 555 or something like that and used those cranks, but I want to put the stuffer crank and the EL48 562 ignition on the 555 cases. Effectively what I'm doing here is building a 560 is what is happening. You know, and they don't offer them here in the States. And this is actually going to be more of a blend because it's probably going to get 562 cover and filter, which I'll eventually change down to a 555. But anyway, I'm rambling. So it's going to get this piston that I had to true up, and this was one of my early attempts. Now, you got to put you see these little tabs? You got to get them on the cylinder first. It'll hold itself in place. I mean, they thought about this. Now, this is the gasket. I don't know if I ever put it on video, but when I was measuring the squish, this was the gasket that I used. So I want to stick with that gasket, no pun intended. Relieving those holes is a lot more important than people think, because after you've brought the cylinder down, you've moved the cylinder, you know, 30 thousandths this way. Well, those holes have moved down 30 thousandths. So you either got to relieve the top, which is tough, or the bottom. Otherwise, when you tighten up that muffler, you're going to put a lot of force on that cylinder. And I've seen some people who can't figure out how come their base gasket leaks right around the transfers. They blame it on the cases and on the design and all that crap. No. The muffler. Trying to hot dog something they don't understand. So Ultimate Old Man Saw lives. I'm not sure it's a venture that's worth repeating anytime soon, at least in the form that I did. Jimmy's over there cutting already because he spent the night here out in the weather while I was home and warm in the house.
You get real old. You get to the point that you can't even start a saw. That's what we got these for.
Oh my God, look at that thing. That thing's really cool. That's coming sooner than we want to admit.
What, made the how to use these?
Yeah. Now what exactly is that?
A little bit now, huh?
What is that?
What is this thing? It's a new 120i. It's an affordable battery-powered saw that literally there's people that come in the store, I'm not kidding, older folks, and they can't start a saw. And we talk about like getting to the point where how much can you carry it and the weight and all that, they can't start the saw. So they come in and like, they say, well, saw won't start. And you'll say, well, show me what you're doing. Well, it won't go. And that's as hard as they can pull it, you know. And what do you tell them? This thing won't compare favorably to anything that we've been running. But the idea, we're going to play with it here, it's not so much how it compares, it's if you can't start a saw at all, can you do any useful work with something like this? It's not going to win any cookie races. The only saw this will beat is a handsaw. but you know, if you wanted to bust up this, you know, we're going to play around with it a little bit. Might be able to do something with it. So.
Well, I'm just going to turn the camera on and let it run over here while we work on this tree. So we'll have a 2-for-1 video here. The first of the electric series and Ultimate Old Man Saw. So how much does one of those cost?
$269.
And that's with a charger?
And a battery.
No kidding.
Yeah.
How much
different stuff is, you know, it's like the pro stuff is good, but it's like, God, nobody's going to buy that. It's like $800 unless you're in the business.
Well, how much difference is there?
I don't know. I think it's going to be longevity, battery life, and stuff like that. This battery doesn't hold as much juice as the other ones. So, this is a lovely day.
Yeah, this is typical central New York now. We've always been able to choose days that are more suited to us. Well, this is kind of the days that are the other days where we don't have a choice how to pick the weather. It picks it for us. So anyway, there's Ultimate Old Man Saw 1 and possibly Ultimate Old Man Saw 2. That's a pleasant surprise. I'm just going to turn the video on here and we're just going to do our thing and you'll see how they perform. Camera is running.
All right. So this is all going back into that way, right? Kind of works. Doesn't sound like a 242.
No. I think he's sharpening a chain. He probably hit some barbed wire. So I got the camera on. So that little electric saw, pretty much everything back to the end of that log was something we could have done with that electric saw. You know that?
Yeah.
And I know we're going to get a lesson on electric saws, but the first thing that comes to my mind is, why in hell's name would you buy a little Poolin for that type of work?
Yeah, the wild thing. This is much better than a wild thing.
Yeah.
It's just the occasional use, no bad gas. There's some, you know, the thing is, with that market, and then really, the other question is, does it have a place?
Oh, I think it does, and I think we just proved it, because both you and I, when we were busting the branches down one step further so they wouldn't, so we could get them out of the grass, both of us went to that saw before pulling our little hot rods.
Yeah.
We're going to do that one.
Down there, we can put it in the forecast.
Yeah, see how Jimmy's doing. Yeah, he's got that pretty much broke up. Did you get a chance to run your new saws?
I did.
How you like them?
2260 was fantastic until I get to the last cut. It must have been a rock. Took all
do you
the
hit?
left-hand cutters right off the finger ran the train.
Well, thank you very much for cleaning that tree off the fence. I really appreciate it.
There was something in here.
Probably
It was in here.
barbed wire. Alright, this video has changed directions a little bit. This is actually really relevant stuff.
Huh?
What exactly is that one?
That's a 2260 with a 3/8 058 chain with a new Oregon lightweight aluminum core bar.
What size sprocket?
Whatever it came with from the factory. I don't have no idea.
That's a 7 then. They cut good, don't they?
Yeah. It's got that explosive acceleration, I guess is what you can call it. I think it does flatten out a little bit when it's really under a load. But for stuff that's anything less than 16, you can't stop it.
I like them. I think they're awesome. Well, we got a lot of work done today. It's cold. I think we're going to call it a day for the video. I think it's time for some food. My camera ran out of battery pretty quick, so this is all telephone from this point on. Thank you very much, by the way.